Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another special session in our special session series. This is the first session of our new year. So, this session is Mental Health in Academia. We have Sharada Nair ma'am with us to guide us through this journey. First, this session has been arranged by Eklavya Foundation for Mental Health. I will talk briefly about Eklavya Foundation for Mental Health. We at Eklavya we deal with three major areas, that is mental health awareness. Second is we work in stigma eradication, which is associated with mental illness. And third is we run self-help support group for patients as well as their caregivers. We have multiple projects going on, like caregivers training program, that is a psycho education for caregivers of person with mental illness. And we are having a project Phoenix, which are the stories of people with mental illness. These are the extraordinary and giving hope. These stories are giving hope to everyone. So we'll be publishing that book soon. So I will hand over this mic to Rohan, and we'll start with our session. Thank you, Rohan. Over
Thank
to
you,
you.
Manjari, and welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I am a volunteer with Eklavya Foundation for Mental Health, and I help facilitate the English self-help group. So, a warm welcome to all of you from the other self-help groups who I don't have an opportunity to normally interact with. Before we begin, before I introduce our speaker, I'd just like to put a quick reminder to everyone to please stay muted during the talk. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat. I'll be posting reminders there. And towards the end of the session, when we have time, we'll be able to answer some of those questions.
And one quick thing is we'll be recording this session. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Sessions are always recorded and will be posted on YouTube for posterity for people who couldn't attend to be able to view it later. Um, with that in mind, it's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Sharada Nair, who has been running a counseling practice in Chennai for over 20 years. She works at Sishya School as a school counselor and started from a medical and psychiatric social work background. She's worked as an adoption scrutiny officer for ICSW in Chennai for over 10 years, as a social worker at CWD Mumbai, and as a social service coordinator for two schools in South Mumbai. She's a qualified practitioner and supervisor in cognitive behavior therapy and has trained in child, adolescent, and family therapy. She belongs to a counseling and training partnership called Sai Energy and is a member of Chennai Counselors Foundation as well as the Indian Association of Professional Supervisors. Our talk today is going to deal with how educators, students, and parents can navigate the world of academia and mental health and how they tie together. So, without further ado, over to you. On a personal note, Sharda ma'am used to be my psychology teacher when I was in high school in class 11. So, it's a pleasure to have her here on a personal level. So, without any further ado, over to you, ma'am.
ma'am, your mic is mute.
I think we have your video, but we don't have your audio.
Audio.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Perfect,
Yes.
loud and
All right. Okay. So I'd like to thank Eklavya Foundation for this opportunity and Manjari and Rohan for asking me to share whatever my experiences have been with mental health in academia, because I think that's something that we naturally use at all times, but very little attention is paid to the details. So I'm glad for this opportunity. Thank you very much. Rohan, I'll just share the PPT, if that's okay.
Yep, all good.
Yeah, can everybody see that? All
Perfectly
right.
fine.
All right. So these are basically what I wanted to talk about today, is understanding mental health in the academic area. We do understand this is ongoing, right? We are learners from the day we are born, probably even before that. And then we keep processing through our lives. So, being aware of what aspects of our learning is going to impact us long term, I would say, is that attention to mental health and understanding awareness of it. So, organizations like Eklavya are doing yeoman service in that area. As Manjari mentioned, stigma is something which we just place on anything to do with mental health. Even with physical health, there are so many stigmas. So when it comes to mental health, it's that much more complex. And I truly believe that the earlier we start, the better it is. So having awareness programs which reach children. And one of the reasons why I went into from a social work background into school counseling was because of that. Uh, Understanding that with each age range, there is going to be changes, how mental health impacts not just the individual, but also the environment. The earlier people recognize this and start doing things to process it, the better it is. So recognizing personal limits and uh, sorry, I'm not able to see the, sorry, 1 second. Yeah. Seeking professional help when needed. So these are the broad areas that I want to kind of touch upon today. I'd like to start with just why we need to talk in terms of academia, because a lot of issues which come up in our school lives as well as in our college lives, we we relate to academic stress, life stress, but we're not paying attention to it. These are kind of the extreme of what can come out of not attending the contributing factors. So if you're looking at academic pressure, deadlines, life changes, social pressure, and stigma around mental health itself, loneliness, isolation, of course, exaggerated by digital habits, trauma, and adverse life experiences. If somebody asks me, what are the basic issues that you see in day to day school counseling? And I think loneliness and isolation is where I would start. So, any kind of difference or change that we are feeling in ourselves can make one feel really lonely, and it can also cause others to isolate you. So I think that's a good area to kind of keep in mind through this exercise that we're doing of just processing this, because that's something we need to definitely pay attention to. Now, I've put together this in the context of what do parents and all the stakeholders in a student's life need to keep in mind, and primarily developmental milestones. Now, we cannot in 40 minutes kind of go through all the developmental milestones and the differences in that, which then will indicate that we need to do something, or we need to help, or we need to process. But if you can just understand that this is something you need to take away, is that if we do feel a disturbance, you do need to look at developmental milestones, because it indicates the pace and process by which a child grows and how they take those steps. As you know, it's not a rigid space, it's a range. Uh, a person can start walking, talking, getting toilet trained, all this in different stages of that early learning. And it's very different for each person. So, keeping that in mind, understanding the broad based structure of it will reduce the pressure of it not happening at the time you expect it to happen, but is also bringing awareness of, is this something that we need to pay attention to? Like I said, it represents averages, not a rigid timeline. And children move through these at varying rates. If you look at the last few words there, developmental milestones in every aspect, whether it is physical, social, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, or recreational. Now, to just expand a little bit on that, physical, of course, is the physicality, the health, the sleep, eating. For young children, these are all very significant, and for parents, very often of concern. Very often, that concern moves to the teacher, where if your child is not eating right, you're telling the teacher, make sure the child eats. So, the physical milestones of your child is important if you're talking from a parent perspective. But for teachers as well, when they are dealing with a large number of students, they will have a range, but they also will be processing the natural physicality of a child. So, with a child with, say, ADHD, how they handle themselves in their physical space can be very different from a child who has other uh, strengths and challenges, right? So, in that context, one does need to be really aware of not just the generic developmental milestones, but individual milestones as well. Uh, Social, of course, social interaction, we'll talk a little bit more about that further on. Emotional, again, we will go through. Intellectual, there is a lot of work happening in understanding in the intellectual milestones in the school and college system. In our country, we've come way ahead in being able to identify, making early identification processes, boards offering um, a range of adaptations for them and allowances for children with different needs, both in school and in college. And we're becoming more open to that acceptance of whatever the requirement is. I say spiritual because self esteem, understanding of themselves, confidence is again something which is very innate to each person. And understanding that even with that, there are milestones. And if certain milestones aren't met, there are spaces where those can be processed. In a class, especially in a sixth grade class, you will find children of very different ranges of their understanding of who they are and what they are. And that just that range of what they're going through between, say, sixth grade to eighth grade can be very challenging on a mental health level. So that too is something you need to process. And recreation is always something which seems to be neglected. A lot of parents seem to want their children to experience a lot of things, or some focus on one thing, but that is not really recreation. We are not paying attention to what is it that a child needs to refresh or rejuvenate themselves. Uh, that too does need to be studied. I would say again, looking at what threshold is your child's level of where relaxation is becoming a pressure, where a pressure can turn into something which is more stressful, right? And we will come back to stress and stress with children. Right, so I'd like to just have a broad picture first before we go a little further in. We're looking at all the stakeholders in a school, in an student's life, the students themselves, the administration, which is the principal, the administration of the school, whoever runs the school, and whoever designs the ethos of the school or the values of the school. And then, of course, the parents, teachers, non-teaching staff, and anyone who comes into contact with the children at that age. So these are all stakeholders in that mental health balance of a child in academic life. And that's something which we all need to be aware of. So when I was told this topic, I also thought I should address the fact that every one of these stakeholders need to have a process for themselves, because when self-care is there, when self-awareness is there, what they are then offering to the students and the children will be more rational and acceptable for the child. Otherwise, very often in the role that the stakeholders are playing, they focus so much on meeting the need of the child that they forget to take care of themselves, let's just say. And even knowing about their own mental state, mental health, and what their requirements are, as a lot of these kind of forums say, use the example of being in an aircraft where they say, put your mask on first before you take care of others around you. It's the same concept, and we need to understand that, because children are learning through observation and imitation. Conditioning, yes, and their innate qualities, yes, but primarily through observation and imitation. So when they see the other stakeholders taking care of themselves and being strong in their own process of taking care of themselves, they will learn to do that too. Very often, the expectation is that the student identifies what is disturbing to them and reaches for help from the parent or the teacher. You don't understand something in class, ask the teacher. You don't, you're not feeling too good, talk to your parent. But how do they learn to do that unless they see it through demonstration? So it is really important for all the stakeholders to understand that any of these things that we're learning should be for ourselves as well. What are we learning then in understanding mental health? That in every one of these areas, it's not just the student, but us as well, who's learning to adapt to the environment. Today, we need to adapt to the language of the generation, right? That is our adaptation. And if we don't adapt to that language, how do we establish rapport? How do we establish an understanding? We want to teach children some content, some information, but if we don't speak their language, and we're asking them to understand in our language and then translate it into their own, it's a larger gap. So the sooner we kind of engage with the students themselves and understand their language, the quicker the rapport is established, the quicker the passion or the interest in the subject can be generated. And the idea of working with children needs to be an interest, not just for the teachers or the parents or the non-teaching staff. Comfort with working with and around children. I would say even the child needs to know that they are comfortable around other children. So if they see the adults around them being comfortable with children, that will encourage them to work with children. We're talking about teaching children empathy. They need to see empathy before they can learn empathy, right? With, again, the learning of the curriculum, learning challenges. These are all things which it's just not enough for the child to get a comfort with. It needs to be the adults as well. And these are things which everybody needs to learn. So when we're talking about what parents need to know, they definitely need to know how comfortable their child is with the curriculum, what learning challenges their child has with regard to what it is, and what are the expectations of the school. Now, it's not enough to just say this is what is expected of this age range, so you should be able to handle it. Very often, just that little window of knowing this is our child's challenge and these are the expectations. So how do we create a space where they can learn the same things but from a different perspective? In our country, our boards are still quite uh, rigid in a certain sense of the content of what is being taught in each class. So it's important to know how the student learns that information, and it need not always be in the way it's delivered. So those are things which both teachers and parents can collaborate on, even if it's an individual child which needs that perspective introduced. It's something which parents and teachers can collaborate, because it is an expectation that the parent understands what the child is dealing with. It's important for the teacher to understand what the child is dealing with, because again, they are conditioned to be dealing with the average child. Uh, an interesting perspective of language style, which we talk about with very young children, is just just being comfortable in the language that they are familiar with can be expanded very easily. It's not so much because children are learning vocabulary and language based on what they're hearing and observing. So putting across the language style to the child with the tone and developing communication skills, all of us need to be on the same page. It's not enough to expect the child to say, don't talk loudly to a teacher, when the teacher themselves is talking really loudly, maybe to be heard. But the thing is that we need to find that balance, and that's really important. So, being aware of our own tonality, our style of communication, they're still going to learn other things and they're still going to come at us with other things. But I would say that's another thing, which area which we have to look at of communication. All stakeholders again need to know first aid in the sense of physical, emotional, and mental if a child is going through something. And here comes awareness. I do want to mention that we cannot teach everybody about every mental health condition, but we can build awareness to be sensitive to any condition that another person is going through. But how do we do that if we are not sensitive to our own? So I think it needs to start with ourselves and to know where we are at physically, emotionally, and mentally before we are sharing that with children, especially below the age of 18. Uh, it is our responsibility to be in that space. Our own emotional challenges, as well as for the children to being able to pick up on what they're feeling at the moment. Collaborating with the other stakeholders. I think that's really important for the administration, parents, teachers. If there is a difference of values in what the parent is seeking and what the school represents, that's not a safe space for the child to grow, because that conflict will give a lot of uh, challenges to the child as well. Changes and adaptation, again, something to be aware of. Health, individually, biological or psychological, and then keeping that ongoing awareness. So rather than looking at what are the disturbances in children in general, understanding specifically what is going on with a child is really important, because very often that can add to the overall behavior of, say, a class without it being addressed, and the whole class may be addressing it inappropriately. So definitely having ongoing awareness programs for teachers to understand individual as well as group behavior is very important. I think it's really important for all stakeholders to understand reproductive system and sexuality. That's mandatory uh, for growth and development of children. Whatever inhibitions or blocks adults have or older people have in that hierarchy of a student's life, it's really important to get more awareness about it, because this is their time to understand themselves and their surroundings. And I like to say, this is the only organ system which kicks in so much later than you have vocabulary for it. We develop vocabulary for it. We've been conditioned to have vocabulary for anything to do with the reproductive system long before it kicks in us. So, how do you then figure out where it falls in, because you're already developing biases or opinions which are coming at you from outside of your own experience of it. So definitely a lot of uh, time and effort should be spent with that, and then to understand that the human being, as they're growing, is living with that survival instinct. So what the child sees as a threat need not necessarily be what the others see as a threat. Similarly, the reverse of what an adult sees as a threat, my child is never going to get into college, can be a threat. And that, based on that, they are using their survival instinct of communicating to the child, right? So this is just broad based some of the things that we do need to pay attention to, and all stakeholders need to pay attention to. Sorry. Yeah. So this is just, I think I just wanted it up there for you to look at the different aspects of it. What we're looking at is we need to understand how we manage expectations of all people involved. Like I said, if a parent's expectation is that the child is comfortable in school, how they convey that to the school or to the teacher can need not necessarily be the way the teacher has an expectation of what the parent is bringing to the school. So similarly, understanding each stakeholder's expectations and then being able to communicate that to the other significant people in the child's life is really important. Otherwise, it can become overwhelming for one or the other. Um, if you look at the next one, which says Introduction to Concepts, we do need to understand that what uh, what concept the child has created in their mind of any particular situation that they're going to face need not necessarily be what the family intends them to create or the school intends them to create. So unless we have discussions about that, and this is not just about academic concepts, it's about concepts of politeness, of value words, of loyalty, of respect. Any of these concepts can have very complex interpretations for children. So, again, collaborating on that, understanding that this is where the the difference is arising from is really important. Recognizing limitations is each of us recognizing our own limitations of our understanding of what's going on. So whether something is happening with us or with our child, knowing that this is all I know, and so this is what I understand, and so I can seek information from someone else to get this better. Now, here again, there is a gap of knowing where to seek that information. Very often, quite early, children are taken to a lot of places, uh, pediatrician, OT, uh, uh, mental health professional, a psychiatrist, and then there is a lot of input which the child is unaware of, and the parent can feel really overwhelmed. So, having some space where they can get that information. So, something like Eklavya Foundation, there are organizations like this all across the country where people can go to get the information of and the awareness of what they need to get awareness of. Because if you get open-ended awareness about a lot of things, that can just add to the confusion. So having specific awareness and information given to you about what you're going through, what is happening right around you, and then recognizing where to seek that appropriate professional help is really important. As you can see, there's a list of age ranges. I like to say that below the age of 9, but anywhere between 7 and 9 is where we form our belief systems or our concepts. And this is behavior patterns set in. But it is very inward looking, or it's very experiential for each individual. Whatever their physical and mental health is, it is very individualized. But 9 to 13 is the time when you're testing it out and checking it out with others. So at that point, there will be a breakaway from what you already know, and you're looking at other things and developing again concepts based on what you're experiencing. So it is very significant, the pre-adolescent time, because a lot of processes are going on very rapidly. Also, the mind and body is changing, the body is changing, the reproductive system is kicking in, and there's a lot of changes happening on all fronts. So I think all stakeholders do need to know that this is a very challenging period, and it's very important to be aware of what's going on with the child. 13 to 16, again, testing it out in the world, but being very unsure of oneself. So looks to the peers and for reinforcement of this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm processing, and is my environment supportive of that, accepting of that, leads to a lot of challenges again. 16 to 24, I would say, is more personal growth again of where do I fit in this world. And I would say then every decade onwards, a lot of this is happening. So going back to that slide about learning, all those processes are happening constantly. We are, if I can just go back there, adapting to the environment, developing passion and interest in what we're doing, understanding the curriculum or the routine or the processes for it in whatever learning we're doing, understanding the language. So any of these things will be very relevant to us and is still relevant as long as we're living, we're learning and growing and processing as we go. So again, so I don't know how much time we have, but yeah, I think we're okay. So I just want to focus on again what all stakeholders need to accept and understand is that we are permanently and constantly looking to have our emotional needs met. Uh, Love, acceptance, appreciation, recognition, trust, and faith. Now, our methods of achieving those needs or having those needs met need not necessarily be the child's understanding of it. We may see in the long run, in the larger picture, that they will achieve these or they will have these needs met if they follow the pattern or the routine that you are setting for them, whether it's the school or it's the teacher or it's the parent. We're all looking to set a comfort space for the children, but it need not be viewed that way unless the child recognizes it for what it is. So there is a communication required where the child experiences the emotional needs met to be able to reinforce it. But very often we do this of telling a student, it's for your own good. They should be experiencing that it's for their own good rather than us telling them it's for their own good. So that switch needs to happen. And I think it's really important for all stakeholders to understand that what we're communicating and how we're communicating, is it received in the way we're trying to communicate it? Because if that happens, then miscommunication, misunderstanding, and it can impact the child's growth and development. Uh, so just to read through this, I'm sure this is something very familiar to all of you. How do we develop emotional skills? By first identifying our emotions, and we're saying not just for ourselves, but for whomever the other is. So if it's a teacher for the student or teacher for the administration, or vice versa, parents and teachers, parents and students. So it really doesn't matter who you are or who the other is, but it's important to identify your own emotions as well as try and identify the other person's emotions. Because then, when you're expressing your emotions, you know that it's appropriate expression of the appropriate emotion. And if the other person is expressing it in a way that you are not identifying the emotion with, then that's a gap which needs to be filled. And that's something you can explore. Similarly, understanding the intensity and degree of feeling, uh, students may come across because they don't have the vocabulary, they don't have the skill sets to put into words or express how intense their emotion is. We could misread the level of intensity. As we become more adult, we learn to hide and filter our emotions and express it in ways in which it's handleable for us. But then we're not teaching children how to be able to identify and express the intensity of their own emotions. So, this is an area really which needs a lot of effort from all the stakeholders. Managing feelings, delaying gratification, controlling impulses, reducing stress, knowing the difference between action and feeling. Uh, this is quite a deep topic. I think if we were to go into it, we could speak a lot more and definitely share a lot more. I'm just touching upon it so that it remains as an understanding that this is something that does needs to be worked on in any interaction. Uh, yeah, so um, if I can ask Rohan, how much time do I have, Rohan?
Uh, we have plenty of time, so please go
Okay,
ahead.
okay. So, right. Um, these are some of the, as I was asked, what should we do, right? What should parents, teachers, students, and other stakeholders do uh, for mental health for ourselves as well as the other? Is first definitely tune into the emotion, identify fears and challenges. It seems broad based, but when you focus on it being, do I see a disturbance in the other person? Am I feeling a disturbance in myself? So, how do I explore my own personal strengths and potential? How do I figure out that this is beyond what I can cope with? Unless we ask ourselves that question, and the minute we do, we don't need to feel the burden of, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, something's wrong with me. It's if I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's something which is more than I can handle at the moment. And for whatever reason. So same aspect of perception if we can put into the other, like the student or our child. If we're looking at, if they're coming across as disturbed, something is beyond what they can handle at the moment, even though they could handle it 3 months back, 6 months back, or they will be able to handle it, and you know they have the potential to handle it later. Focusing on right now, what are the fears and challenges that they're having to be able to function. So, using professional help at that point, once you've explored your own strength and potential to handle that situation, either for yourself or for the child. And any suggestions or any professional help that is given to you is only relevant if it works for you. So, understanding that it's an experiment that you can try, it's not a condition that you have to follow, but it's an experiment that you can try, will open up to you trying different things and making it work for you. I'd like to just go back, if you don't mind, to right. So if you see the sequence of what we're looking at in terms of understanding mental health uh, in the context of all the stakeholders involved, it seems simplistic, I know, to say that you need to know age appropriate emotional development, recognize your own limitations, and then seek professional help. That seems like a equation which seems simplistic. Mental health is such a wide range or wide field that one cannot put across. I kind of brought it down to this simply because what can you draw awareness to in a school, say, uh, except for giving the opportunity for individuals to recognize if something is not okay, if something seems uncomfortable. And that can only seem uncomfortable to you or to the other. To explore that and to find out more information about how to handle that is part of the process of, say, having a school based support system. Need not necessarily be just a school counselor, but teachers who are more aware of what could be something that the child is dealing with. Rather than them knowing what could be, if they know they have a protocol of, if the child is disturbed, what are the steps I can do? That gives them a lot of comfort. Uh, as would any of us, if we know there is a system into which we can put what we're feeling and then figure it out. So having really uh, support systems, organizations which will talk you through that or help you through that, that's really important. And I would say the primary awareness needs to be that there are organizations and people who will help you put into perspective what's going on with you, what's going on with the other. Because most often it's parents overwhelmed with not knowing how to handle what their child is going through or what they are going through, teachers not knowing how to convey what is going on in class to the parent feeling helpless about trying to fix what's going on in school, the child completely helpless about what they are feeling and acting out in whatever way they know to cope with what they're feeling or what they're. So, unless there is a collaborative process of all the people who are in the child's life, at least addressing the fact that there is something which is making the child uneasy or making you uneasy from what you're seeing of what the child is doing, there needs to be communication about it. So I would say that's the primary uh, goal. Um, I would like to say that this, yeah, let me just go back to that. Yeah, the idea is not to say that we're only looking at mental health in the concept of it developing into some mental health condition. The thing is that mental health is as significant as physical health, but the process need not be um, seen as something which has to be dealt with. We will grow into living with ourselves, whatever our conditions are. We will grow into being comfortable with it as long as it is processed in an appropriate way. So yes, we are looking at a whole lot of disorders and conditions where the distress has led to uh, an inability to function in the way one would like to function. But that's not true enough, because we also need to look at the person is surviving, the person is living a positive life, and it's not about judging yourself, which is what we do the most of, based on what you're dealing with as a condition. And I think primarily, if we can convey to children that you're good, whatever you are, and children start feeling that, then they will own their conditions and the awareness will have worked. Because a challenge is what someone sees as a challenge. Now, whether it's the child themselves or the person who's dealing with the child on the daily basis, as as long as they work together with the child, then it's not a challenge. It's just a variable in the child's life, right? And I think that's something which I truly believe needs to be uh, generated in in children. Children can be very accepting or very isolating. So, if awareness were to happen at that level, primarily with teachers and parents conveying to children that it's okay to be different, it's okay to have things which don't work the way others expect it to work. So, definitely, expectations need to be processed. Parents need to own their own expectations and understand that these are purely their expectations. The line of it's for your own good or it's for your future, that's the parent's expectation, not the child's. How for the child to engage in that, it has to be an immediate expectation which is going to reward the child in some way. Um, yeah, I just want to also kind of touch upon the survival instinct, um, which we all have, which is which is healthy. It gives us an awareness of what to look out for. It's a emotional and physical state of preparedness, right? Fear is that. It puts us in that state of being prepared to anticipate a potential threat. And that's a healthy space to be in, because that's what gives us solutions to things. So being able to not transfer that into an underlying fear of everything, but being able to channel it towards specifically what that threat is or understanding threats is aligned to understanding expectations. And it's healthy to have expectations, it's healthy to set standards and then to make an effort to achieve that. It's understanding the line between where it becomes distressing and causes stress, which then gets transferred into other things. Um, right. So I'd like to kind of stop here for now and open up to some questions. And if uh, we can have some discussion. I don't normally do this where I talk continuously and then wait. I prefer to engage in interactive space. I work with children and they can be very interactive constantly. So this is a little new for me, but
Thank you
I
so much, Sharda. That was, I know I learned a lot. Um, so, just to summarize a little bit, I think you really touched upon how each stakeholder, and you identified various kinds of stakeholders, sort of need to first take care of themselves, be in tune with themselves, and only then will they be in a position to help with a child. Um, I think I remember seeing a slide that you had with a list of disorders that you quickly skimmed over. But I would like to maybe talk a little bit about some of the conditions faced by young people today, not just in high school, but in colleges as well, which are being more and more coming more and more to the forefront. I remember when I was in high school, I think dyslexia was one of the only learning disabilities that was mentioned. Today, we have a lot more research into neurodivergence, into other forms of learning disabilities. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what a parent could do when they suspect or they encounter a child who is exhibiting signs of learning disability or ADHD or neurodivergent, however severe on the spectrum.
Okay, thank you for that. So, yeah, like I said, below the age of 9, we only do screening. But if a child uh, exhibits some, like you said, a parent picks up on it, a teacher picks up on it, then there is early intervention to a certain extent, but mostly early identification, which can happen at any point of time. Uh, there are agencies which do assessments, or I would say screening. It's not assessments at that point. And we need to, as parents, we need to understand that even if one sees a learning difficulty in your child, it's only for the teacher and you to process what is going on with the child and wait for the child to reach the age where an assessment can be done. Usually by around 9, an assessment can be done. And at that point, whether it is a learning difficulty or it's an ADHD or it's a combination of a lot of things, the primary thing for a parent to do is to get the assessment and read the whole assessment. Have someone interpret it for you if the agency that's doing the assessment doesn't give you all the details, because it's not just the recommendation that one needs to look at. One needs to look at what are the strengths as well, because an assessment will cover both the strengths and challenges of the child. Of course, there are interventions that you can do. There are accommodations that are given by the boards for any of this. But by about 9, 10, it's perfectly all right to do an assessment. What we do need to understand as stakeholders is that if a child has been coping with learning difficulties, the child is using a lot of their energy to cope and to meet the requirements. So it is really mandatory to give them the accommodations they need right away so that they can release that energy and use it in learning in other respects. So uh, whether it is medical intervention with regard to ADHD and any of this, again, it needs a professional assessment. But that those are only tools to assist the child to be able to function and use their abilities in other areas. So it's really important to do those assessments and then have it put into practice in at the home, in the school, and have all the stakeholders involved to know these are the challenges that the child is living with and coping with. So despite that, they are still functioning. Also, to not assume all behavior is connected to the condition, or all behavior is not. So, to know very clearly which behavior does come out of the challenges of the condition and which behavior is just natural growth and development behavior. I mean, it's part of the process of growing up to experiment or to act out, or so immediately to kind of connect it with the intensity based on the the condition of the child should not happen. So definitely awareness needs to happen at that stage of the stakeholders knowing if this is a condition, how does one handle it, what is the child going through in experiencing that condition. I think that's really important, because how you behave with that child reflects on how the rest of the students behave with that child, and they are going to take their cue from the adults around them. I hope that kind of.
That was very, very helpful because it also reminds me of, especially what you last said about other children also taking the cue.
Mhm.
It reminds me of a fellow student of mine, a classmate of mine who had a speech impediment and stuttered. And in many circumstances, a child like that can get bullied. But in our class, in our particular environment, we sort of protected that child. And having now spoken to him as an adult, he has also explained a lot of his behavior because he used to act out a lot. If you remember correctly, I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. He used to act out a lot, and he explained that as a way of deflecting from the condition that he was suffering from, because often he found it was the teachers that were putting him in a spot rather than the students.
Yeah.
Um, so we have a question from Rama ma'am who asks, I think she's asking on behalf as a parent, because I think this goes back to something you were talking about, how best to enhance personal limits or overcome them. I think she's referring to biases and in latent values that we might have grown up with or that have come from outside, like you were mentioning. Is there a simple method of doing it?
I would say be aware and conscious of it. So I'll share a little experience in eighth grade when we do sexuality education. One of the things that we cover is masturbation. And when we were talking about it, I was telling this eighth grade class, and we were discussing how the challenges of understanding, as long as it's healthy and it's not taking up your mind space and your time space, and as long as you're not hurting yourself or hurting anyone else, how it's a healthy way of understanding your own body. One student said, what about if it's already, so I said, and as long as there's no guilt attached to it. So he said, what if there's already guilt based on, you know, conventions and what people say about it, and value systems that are passed down. And so all I could say was know it for when it's happening and when it's kicking in, and definitely don't put that on your children, right? So we need to understand what our limitations are. We are going to have a flare up of belief systems popping into our head. As long as we don't pass it on, that is the limitation we need to understand. We don't need to say, oh, but when I was growing up, this was unacceptable. Why do you need to say that? You know it's acceptable. Why do you need to pass on that information? When talking about menak, when girls get their periods first, and in some cultures it's made a big thing of, in some it's not, and it's just, some are comfortable with being conscious about it, some are not. Some say, oh, it's a party, we get a lot of presents, it's fine. Some say that's horrifying, we don't even want to know what you do with it. So even with things like that, when we're talking about our own limitations. And a lot of the time, there are children who say our mothers hate it, but they still do it because it's required in the family, or it's a tradition, or it's a cultural thing. So, why are we passing on things which we don't have our head wrapped around? We do need to be able to at least discuss it with the child, then they'll take a call on it. But to be able to talk about our own process as parents, for sure. I know teachers cannot do that unless it's in the context of the lesson. In which case, use the opportunity to share your own discomfort with with certain rigid conventions which were passed down. Because again, a lot of these things kind of turn around and come back, right? So unless we have that kind of communication where we talk about our discomfort with it, how do we then equip children to process what to accept and what not to accept? Either they reject completely something which may help them and let it go, or they accept something just because it's there already. I hope that answers your question.
I think that was a very informative answer. We have time for one last question, which deals with adolescence. So, in teenage years, or one major issue seen in children is they build up a habit of getting angry quickly. Then later, in alone time, like at bed, when they're alone, they regenerate, find themselves guilty, blaming themselves, and there are possibilities that this could lead to depression. How do we help him or her in this situation?
I think that one recognizes this is very important. That the level of guilt that children feel, even really young children, uh, the guilt of not meeting the expectation, or like this crossing a line which happened in the moment, that it's okay to do something wrong, to do something that they think is wrong, a- as long as there's learning out of it. So I would say the primary way to help children grow is to say, what did you not like about it, and what would you like to do differently with it? I think just that will help them process that in the moment they did whatever they did, but with that is with the information and the life experience they had up until that moment. But now, having had this experience of feeling guilty about it, what would you like to do with it now? The next time it happens, would you like to go back and apologize? And a lot of children say, I don't want to go back and apologize. Maybe that person deserved me to be angry at them, but how I said it is not okay with me, right? So, guilt is truly quite debilitating to children. And I'm glad Preeti, I think, said that it can lead to other emotional distress as well. So, addressing that it's healthy to feel guilty, that guilt is only your conscience raising its head. So, own it, have a chat with it, understand what it is that you're feeling guilty about, and then move from that to a learning that then that's not something you're going to choose to do because it doesn't sit well with you. And then we skill train yourself to not do it as often, or find other channels of expressing it. Practice saying things which are not as negative to you. The other person may not really care, but it's what you're feeling about it that's causing the guilt, right? So definitely having a conversation about it, letting them own the guilt to be true to them, and then letting it go. By just saying that's okay, you said it in the moment, is not going to sit right because they are feeling guilty about something. So I
Thank
think
you
that,
so much. Yeah, I think we're at time now. So I'd just like to thank you once again for taking your time out to give us this amazing talk. And I'm sure a lot of people will also keep watching this in the future. Manjari, if you have any announcements, I'd like you to please take over. Thank you.
No, we don't have any announcement, but this session will be available on our YouTube channel. So once it is uploaded, I'll send it to you, ma'am, a recording of this session. And everybody who has not subscribed to our Eklavya Foundation's channel, you can subscribe. So as soon as this video is uploaded, you will get the notification. And thank you, ma'am. Even though it was related to school children, but we could see the parallels, like you said that we all are learning. As a parent, I learned a lot, but as a person who is learning that how we should deal with our emotional needs and how for these things. Maybe stakeholders change when we grow up, but the scenario is the same thing. So thank you for that. I mean, it was really good session.
thank you so much for all those who are here, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Thank you.
See you again. We would like to see you again.
Sure. I'd love to attend your sessions as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. For those in the English group, we will be meeting next Wednesday on a sharing session at our usual time. I'll be sending you the link shortly.